All right, folks. Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome to Recovery Live. And I am Stephen Samra. C4 Innovations is just thrilled to bring you another Recovery Live event. Next slide, Mia, please. If you've attended previous Recovery Live events, you know that we bring top-tier speakers, interesting and challenging issues, and creative strategies that really help peers and non-peers alike in working to improve the lives of others. And today is a particularly special day. Next slide, please. We at C4 are committed to advancing recovery, wellness, and housing stability for people who are marginalized. And we're also committed to reducing disparities and working to achieve equitable outcomes. We engage and we support and we partner with service organizations, with communities, with systems to develop and implement research-based and evidence-based solutions that are always person-centered, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed. And you can learn a lot more about the work that C4 does. You just pop into our website at c4innovates.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn and YouTube if you're inclined. We'd love to have you. Next slide. Today's Recovery Live events are just like those in the past. They're interactive, and we want you to engage directly with our presenters and each other. Just use this chat box. The speakers are going to share a bunch of initial thoughts, and then we're going to come back and answer any questions that you all might have raised during the time we're in this event. Know that you're all in listen-only mode, and you can introduce yourself and pose questions. You can share resources. You can put links, whatever you need to know. And particularly if you've got any tech difficulties, put them in the chat box. Happy to try and resolve that. And we have a great tech team here, so they should be able to address any of that. If you want to send a private message to any of the hosts, please be sure you use that drop-down arrow and select all panelists in order to get your message right to them. But we do want you to all participate in the chat that you feel comfortable. And to do that, just make sure that you select hosts and attendees. And I think that's the default setting anyway. And that way your message goes out to everybody. To access that chat, just click the word chat on the screen. The chat box is going to pop out. You can resize it if you want, drag it around, put it on the side so it stays up there, but kind of out of the way of the content. Next slide. So today's event is actually going to last 90 minutes, and it is being recorded. That recording link is going to be shared with anybody who registered after this event. And more importantly, I think it's going to be available on the C4 YouTube channel that is on the slide there. And if as you're listening to this content, you think or feel your organization, a system, whatever it may be, might want some technical assistance or support around this or any other topic that's related to behavioral health, just email us at training@c4innovates.com. We'll discuss it. We'll brainstorm strategies. We'll work together to figure out what it is that will suit and serve you best, and then we'll do everything we can to make that so. Next slide, please. All right. Let me bring us all back to why we're here today, because I'm telling you, we are beyond fortunate to have these three speakers on your screen today. All three of these folks have military service. Two of them are combat veterans. And joining us today, David Galloway, USMC Iraq War veteran and a peer and education lead for a Maryland-based veteran program. We have Emil Caron, who's a certified peer with Recovery Connections of Central Florida as the Recovery Center coordinator. Emil has military service. And then we have JC Smith, who is a Vietnam U.S. Army veteran. JC's also a peer and a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And JC recently retired from the Mobile, Alabama Veterans Administration. Now, before I go any further, on behalf of all of us, please allow us all to send a huge and humble thank you for your service, gentlemen. Today's session is going to focus on military sexual trauma, and it's going to go 90 minutes instead of that normal 60. This topic is incredibly important to raise awareness about, and the men with us today are speakers with both professional and lived experience on this topic. This discussion should help you obtain a deeper understanding of the challenges, the impact, and the strategies and efforts to support others who may have experienced military sexual trauma, regardless of the gender. Now, before we get underway, please be sure to add questions or comments you might have into the chat, as we're going to move into Q&A after the speakers have talked. And we're about to get started. So, gentlemen, Emil, let me turn to you first. If you could share just one important issue, perspective, opinion, or thought about why this topic was important enough for you to agree to speak to our audience today, what would that thing be?
Thanks for having me, Steve, and thanks for the veterans that have joined me here at this webinar. So yeah, my name is Emil Caron. I am a U.S. Navy veteran, also a certified recovery peer specialist, working with marginalized veterans, other populations, people who are incarcerated. But yeah, so I'll generally touch on a little bit of my story to help everyone understand why it's important for me to be here and be speaking in this event. So yeah, I was raised by my father, who was a U.S. Navy veteran, a family of U.S. Navy veterans as well. In my life, through school and up to my graduation from high school was geared around, my Navy career. I was an ROTC participant. So everything I did in my life up to my service in the Navy was built around, developing that, life for myself. And so when I found myself in boot camp at 17 years old, I was sexually assaulted by a few other recruits in boot camp. This began to when I was released from boot camp, I started using substances, as a coping mechanism for dealing with that trauma. And it escalated from alcohol to other drugs. As I got 7 DUIs before I was 21 years old. I was other than honorably discharged from the military because they had a zero tolerance policy for underage drinking at that time. And, having, spent my life up to that point, trying to, wrap my head around why I couldn't be successful in the military was really hard for me to handle. So, the use of drugs and alcohol just really spiraled out of control for me. And so, it's important for me to be here and speak on this topic because I feel like very strongly that, the message of recovery is important to carry to everyone, not just veterans, but, especially veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma. And, a voice, I like to think of myself as a voice for those people so that they know that recovery is possible. My life was, I went all the way to the bottom. I like to, think of myself as a good peer now. I work with people that are in recovery, and I have so much experience with this stuff like homelessness, incarceration, and I really try and just express the value of lived experience with the people I work with every day. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Steve.
Emil, brother, that is as courageous as I've ever heard. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and modeling your recovery, modeling that courage, modeling that badassery that you bring to the table, because that's what it is. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful to know you. And I want to turn to David and JC both. Gentlemen, thoughts on what Emil's shared, and anything else you want to add?
Yeah, first, if I want to second what Steve said. Thank you, Emil, for sharing your story. I know for myself, it's hard always talking in front of people, but for veterans in general, it's hard telling that story. Your time in the military, I know for a lot of us, is that kind of sense of excellence, and the military is supposed to represent something. So when you feel betrayed by the military and then don't get the resources you need and end up not being able to get the resources, because like you said, being discharged from the military with a other than honorable discharge kind of precludes a lot of those resources. And a lot of the providers out there might not know that. And that's one of the big things about veterans coming forward and telling their stories, especially not just to other veterans, but to clinicians in particular, is I know I work in the clinical field out in Maryland, and a lot of clinicians hear the word veteran and assume you can go to the VA and get help, but they don't realize all the red tape and all the ifs, ands, or buts. And I think only about 30% of veterans actually that are eligible actually go to the VA for help. So that means the other 70% are coming to you, the clinicians. And Emil's story, he's brave enough to tell it, but there are many, many more veterans out there with similar stories, and veterans who struggle with their own stories. So thank you for sharing and showing what can come of it.
Well, I wanted to say thank you as well, Emil. Our stories are very similar, and it's because of our stories is why I'm here. I found out very early on. I'm in recovery for alcohol and drugs as well, and as of this past October, I had 28 years sobriety. That is the foundation of all of my recovery. And what it taught me, one of the main things it taught me about myself, was that every time I told my story got a little bit lighter to carry. And so when I've got 28 years of recovery from alcohol and drugs, but I only have about 15 years recovery from PTSD and depression and anxiety and MST. And if we always going to use acronyms. So those of you who are not military, I'm going to try to break that down. Basically, military sexual trauma. I've had to go through so much healing from that. But what I found the most healing part of my journey has been sharing my story with another veteran who could sit back and just shake his head and more than hear me, but knew what I wasn't saying as well as what I was. And for me to be able to share that here, share it then, share it tomorrow, will continue to bless me in my journey. And I thank you guys for your service, and I thank Steve for bringing us together.
And JC, if I can piggyback on that, I think you bring up a great point with the value of peers in general and the lived experience. Whether it was Emil's background or JC's or I had mental health struggles and PTSD and some of the things I did and saw in Iraq. But the story is the same for a lot of us. We use substances to try and cope with that mental health. And for a lot of veterans, that's the same. And we feel like we're the only ones suffering through it. And it's not really until we talk to another veteran who, even if they're Emil's situation or JC's situation, we can have a conversation and talk about our struggles and realize we're not alone when we talk to that other veteran. And we don't have to explain all those acronyms that are discussed. And, for a lot of us, it's the first time telling that story when we go into a clinical office. So even if you don't know what those acronyms are, try to let the veteran get through it and then come back to it. They will. I like it when my clinicians take an interest in my stories, and it shows me that they're listening and that they want to know more about me and what I did. But let me finish my story before I get there. And I think that's a great reason for peers. They kind of warm you up into that situation and get you to the point where you feel comfortable telling your story. And I know it took another veteran kicking me in the ass, telling me I need to tell my story, all of it, to get the benefits that I deserve. And that's where a lot of veterans struggle. We don't think we deserve it for a period of time after we get out. And it's not really until we find that mission again that we start looking for those benefits again.
I'd like to say something on that, Dave. And that's the fact that I would say that 75% or more of the veterans that I ever had in the clinic always were fighting me and trying to help them. I was like, well, I'm not really that bad. That guy I saw when I came in probably needs it. You know, every time it's like, dude, you know, just relax, man. It's okay. You deserve everything you get. As a matter of fact, I used to tell them, get everything the government, the VA has to offer, everything, because you've earned it. Whether you believe it or not, you have earned it. Get it. So thanks for saying that, man.
You guys bring up so many valuable points. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up, you know, like as a peer, it's interesting. Recently, I was asking a job interview why I don't just go work for the VA. And for one, as being a veteran who has an other than honorable discharge, I've carried a lot of resentment against the VA, you know, for what happened to me, and then for, you know, not being able to get those services, and then you know, the struggle it took me to actually get into those services once I was finally ready. But so I, you know, when I answered that question in the interview was, you know, really, I would like to work with those veterans that do have other than honorable discharges, the ones that aren't able to get services through the VA. So, and I've had a lot of encounters with those people, and you know, I've gone through the process of upgrading my discharge, which has finally been mailed out, and you know, it's such a process, but I got a response that says it could be 2 more years before I even find out if my discharge is actually upgraded. But, you know, I stay in the process of recovery, you know what I mean? And like, that's how I get through these things. I share my lived experience with others, and that really helps me stay in the fold and stay in the process of recovery. I just love recovery.
And I think a reason a lot of us veterans struggle when we get out is that loss of mission, that loss of focus. I didn't have anything really I needed to do. I was going to school for criminal justice, but I was self-medicating myself through criminal justice, which doesn't leave myself a lot of career opportunities when I get out, especially throwing in a couple of those DUIs, like Emil said. So then I didn't have that mission either for what was going to happen once I graduated college. And without that mission, I kind of fell apart. And I think that's how a lot of veterans do it. For me, my mission was getting peer work, but I think a lot of veterans, that mission is recovery, either from substances or from mental health. For me, my substance use has always been secondary to my mental health. When my mental health's good, substances aren't really there, but when my mental health goes downhill, I still turn to substances. And so it's a constant struggle. But getting that mission back, and for me, it was getting my life back and not being kind of held accountable or holding myself accountable for my actions. And, you know, being able to celebrate Memorial Day weekend coming up instead of just drowning the weekend in a bottle. So making those kind of steps in my recovery to be able to be where I want to be mentally gave me that mission back and wanted me to be that proud veteran again. Because when I was at college, I didn't do the high and tight. I didn't look the veteran part because I wasn't proud of it and I didn't want anybody to ask me about it. So yeah, I think getting that mission back for that veteran is what, and peer work is a great mission for that veteran because there's nothing we won't do for another veteran.
That's exactly what I was going to say, David. It wasn't until I got in this line of work that I really started to feel like I had a purpose again. You know, I had most of the things that SAMHSA defines supports a life in recovery. I had stable housing. You know, I had a great community support through, you know, my 12-step groups. I had a job that wasn't really fulfilling my purpose. You know what I mean? My health was in good working order. But like when I got into the peer field, and I started helping people, I felt aligned with my purpose again, you know, and I felt fulfilled. And in the first time in 20 years since I was discharged from the service, you know, and that's how I stay in the process of recovery.
Amen.
So I got to chime in. I got to chime in here because so let me first just preface it by saying, excuse me, Emil, I introduced you earlier as a person with military service for exactly the reason that, you know, you and I and David and JC have chatted about in the past. And it's because for a long time, you didn't call yourself a veteran. And I have to tell you, hearing that come out of your mouth today actually brought tears to my eyes because it was so powerful, right? Because you owned what is yours. JC made this comment earlier about how folks, you gotta basically twist their arm to take the things that belong to them. And one of the things when I was working alongside JC in a place called Operation Stand Down Nashville, now it's Operation Stand Down Tennessee, it's going statewide, but it's a fabulous veteran services organization, it's a nonprofit. And one of the things that JC taught me there, because I am not a person with a military background, I've got family members, but I've never served. And I remember JC telling me one time, Stephen, what is most frustrating is that every single veteran that comes through here has, as long as they've got an honorable discharge, they've earned everything that they're refusing to take because they think it's handouts. And whether or not you've got military service or you consider yourself a veteran, there's a lot of resources that you earned. They're not handouts. And I remember trying to convince folks that, it's the values, the mission you did, all the things that you endured and you put up with. And this belongs to you. And that was one of the hardest pieces, I think, for me, in terms of trying to deliver services and supports to people I knew deserved them, earn them, and essentially own them, but wouldn't claim them. That was incredibly challenging and hard for me. And when I see the three of you, making it easier and making that point that, this ain't charity. You guys worked really hard and endured a lot to get the few benefits, when you really get down to it, that are available to all of you. So that message alone is powerful.
Yeah, so you bring something to mind to me that I think is important to mention. As a veteran who does have an other than honorable discharge, once I was finally abstinent from the drugs and I was ready to come to terms and deal with the trauma that I had gone through, I did turn up at the VA and I decided to try and get some help. So it wasn't until I was there at the VA and I was meeting with a veteran service officer about how to upgrade my discharge, because really I just didn't know what was available to me at that time. And I saw the sign on the billboard or on the cork board behind him that said military sexual trauma. And in my mind, up until that point, I was the only person that had gone through this thing, and so I didn't say anything at that time. I sort of, came back to my treatment center and I pondered about it and I was like, all right, I need to, mention this, see, so maybe I can get some help. And it turns out there's something called the Compassion Act, I believe, which is what allows veterans who have suffered from MST, PTSD, TBI, or any of those acronyms, who have gotten an other than honorable discharge. This is a sort of a thing that Congress came up with that allows these veterans to engage in services, even if they don't have or otherwise aren't, able to get veteran services. So I was able to start getting treatment from my VA providers for EMDR, and I've just completed my EMDR. And I'm actually about to transition to some CPT. But yeah, this was a game changer for me. And without those treatments, I don't think I would be sitting here in front of you guys today, being able to talk to you about being in recovery. Like and I was told early in the treatment of EMDR that this therapy would allow you to become the person you might have been before any of these things happened, before any of the drugs and all that stuff. And it sounded like a lot of hocus pocus to me, but I just had enough willingness to give it a try. So, I believe in this stuff wholeheartedly today. Like, it was a game changer for me. So anyone that has another than honorable discharge, is struggling with, going back to the VA, just take that step. I remember the provider telling me, I was broken when I got there. And she said, what do you have? What more do you have to lose? And I had lost everything. Homeless for 7 years, chronic opioid use disorder, like overdoses, arrests. I had nothing more to lose. just enough willingness to try and do something different. And that was really the turning point for me.
You know, Emil, I wanted to say, I too had an other than honorable, no, excuse me. I too have an other than honorable discharge. And Steve can relate to this back at when we did work together at Operation Stand Down, because it was a grant-driven agency. It was written in the grants that we did not serve people with dishonorable discharges. And that just, I can't say the term that I want to use, but it chapped my butt. How about that? And I got into constant fights with the executive director because I would go out and still, you know, I would try to help these guys. I would lead them or refer them to people who could help them, and he would say, "You can't spend time on that. We're not getting paid for that." And I would tell him, "You might not be getting paid for it, but I am, you know, because I know why a lot of these people got these bad discharges to start out with." See, back when I came out of the service, you know, we all knew when you went in that discharge was a weapon, was a tool that management could use to keep you in line or to punish you or to destroy your life if they wanted to. And a lot of people of color, military people of color, got bad discharges just because. And so I knew that if anybody needed help, those were the people that needed help the most. Nobody came to the VA, and I've had many people come to the VA with dishonorable discharges, other than honorable discharges, and I get them in via humanitarian means until I can get them with a VSO who can get them a service connection. Once they get the service connection, they get all the services. I've learned the loopholes. Thank God that I'm in there because nobody else would tell them that. So amen for you, brother, for coming on into the VA, even with all of that angst. Nobody has ever come into the VA that the VA did not fail. The government has failed them. That's why they're there in the first place. Thank you, man.
And I think that kind of brings up a big question about the stigma associated even with the word veteran, because, you know, if you can't go to the VA for help, then I know a lot of veterans won't necessarily consider themselves a veteran. My dad, he was an Army Ranger, so they're like almost as good as Marines. But he was Army Ranger for like 16 years. And but when we go to a baseball game together and they ask the veterans to stand, he doesn't stand next to me because he's not a combat veteran like me. And there's just so much stigma associated with the word veteran and if, ands, or buts. So we really try to instead ask the question, have you or a loved one served in the military? Because that tends to get more responses, because if they have that dishonorable discharge, they have just been told they get nothing, you know. But like JC said, there are loopholes, because if you were a paratrooper who did 16 years and then did something stupid to get a dishonorable discharge, you still had 16 years of honorable service and you still have 16 years of jumping out of airplanes. So you're probably going to feel that. So if you can connect with that VSO, you can still get those resources. And I know we're probably confusing a lot of the non-veterans out there with how to connect veterans. So every state has a veteran service benefits office of some sort. Find your local office. They're never a wrong first step. And also find your local legions like JC, and find those American Legions, VFWs in your area, because they are filled with old timers who have gotten told so many times no, that they've figured out those loopholes, and they want nothing more than to get those young time veterans the resources and benefits they deserve. And if anybody's going to get us talking, it's going to be a group of other veterans. So why not send them to there?
Also want to add that you're definitely right. You do not have to have been in combat. Some of them don't even believe they're veterans, but there are many, many people in the service who have mental health, behavioral health issues, who've never been in combat, And it is because of their trauma and experience in the military that they got those issues. They need to come into the VA.
Of course, yeah, JC's 100% right. I was never in combat. You know, I never even left Great Lakes. I was there for over almost 2 years in training, which was really a training in how to use drugs and alcohol for me. You know, that's what it ended up being. But, you know, I see a point that was made by Erica in the chat about getting a disability rating. I haven't gotten that far. You know, I'm 3 years into my recovery. Just so you guys know, I just celebrated 3 years. But, you know, I initially went into the VA just to work on my discharge. I started getting treatment. You know, I learned later about peer support and I got engaged with that. And, you know, I've never really worked with the veterans in the VA, but, you know, I have been connected with the VA getting my treatment there. But yeah, one of the things I was actually screened recently, and this goes to something I would like to tell those of you that are providers that are listening, because I was being screened by another provider for my CPT. And one of the questions she was asked, we were talking about sex, okay, and I started getting uncomfortable because a lot of that conversation is still, you know, pretty raw for me, and especially with a new person. So I started getting uncomfortable and I started sort of backing out of the conversation, and I wanted to stop. Well, the question she asked me next really kind of shocked me. She said, you know, this isn't about getting disability or service-connected disability, right? And I said, I haven't even filed for that yet. And I mean, it literally floored me. I almost fell out of my chair because it was just so insulting that she asked me something like that. And I almost completely disengaged from treatment altogether. I had called my old provider, my EMDR provider. I was like, I don't even know what just happened, but this, you know, it just doesn't feel right anymore. Maybe I don't need to get any more treatment. And it was really, you know, like it kind of messed up my progress for quite a while until I finally got a new CPD provider. Yes, cognitive processing therapy, and I feel a lot more comfortable with this person. But you know, she didn't phrase it in such a way that made me feel like I was only talking to her to try and get benefits, because that was just mind blowing to me.
And out of all the veterans I've talked to, I've been working with veterans, let's see, 15 years since I've been out. And I've been working with veterans that whole time. And the number one reason is that I've heard for them not wanting to get benefits is that they don't want to take away benefits from other veterans. They don't want to take away services from other veterans. So if a veteran comes to you and then gets asked questions like that to Emil, then that just goes into what they've already been dreading, that they're taking away resources. That's not why we're here. We don't want the PTSD label. There's a whole lot of more headaches that come with it than the 30% disability rating payment. But, you know, that's already one of our worst fears. You know, we don't want to take away those resources. That was why I lost friends while I was overseas, lost limbs, eyesight, lost their lives. So if I was going to come back and just have nightmares and things, then I was okay to deal with that on my own, because I didn't want to take away any of those VA resources. Knowing what I know now, the more veterans like Emil that come forward and show the gaps and show where we need those services, the more money the government or nonprofits can throw at the problem to fill in those gaps.
Man, I really, that made me so angry when you said that, man. I'm like, I have had to confront some clinicians, some providers who literally said in a meeting, oh, this guy's a malingerer. All he wants is money. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell does that have to do with what you're here for? Sometimes you need to tell the veteran. The VA is a lot of different sections. There's the VHA, which is Veterans Health Administration. Then there's the VBA, which is the Veterans Benefits Administration. And you need to know that just in case somebody wants to cross that line. I wish I would have spoken to you. That's why we need peers connecting with other peers too, because I would have told you straight up, man, that whoever said that just crossed the line ethically, morally, every way you could come up with, and they should be called on. So, man, oh, that just made me cringe.
I looked into filing a grievance, JC, and the grievance process was so difficult, and no one ever got back to me about it.
Yeah. I know, and I tell you what, I also tell, and I hope there are some VA people on here, because I'm retired now, so I can say what I want to say. I've also told some people, don't go to the patient advocate. That's a waste of time. If you got a problem and a grievance, go ahead and write the director. Go ahead and write a congressional person. Go over their heads. Go straight to the source of pain. We didn't play when we were in the service. You didn't go piddle paddle with folk. You had to deal with that chain of command. You knew that if it was your sergeant or your commander that was messing with you, you don't go to somebody less than him for resolve. Excuse me. I'm sorry, y'all. I got off track there.
It's okay. I think that shows another good point. There's a lot of stigma associated with the VA too, and veterans are learned and bred that the VA is not the solve all to their problems, and we're scared of the red tape. We're scared of the process. We're scared of all the bureaucratic nonsense. I did the same thing. I tried to go to my VA rep on campus. It's like, I need to talk to somebody. He's like, I just mail this letter to this address. That's all I do. And I was like, all right, well, I tried. So my next step was years later to, through a VBA or benefits, I tried to file PTSD for benefits. And so then you go in for a compensation and pension exam. And I went in, and that's my first time ever really telling my story. And I actually had a great person who I made cry. But she literally took me by the arm and walked me up to the OEF program and was like, he needs to be enrolled in your program. And so by doing that one benefit step, that got me into VA healthcare. So there really is no wrong door. Counseling isn't the right thing for everybody. I don't want to say like this is how every veteran wants to do it. Once you get connected with one veteran resource, you're going to get connected to more veteran resources. So just getting that veteran that first step in the door is all it really takes, no matter what door it is, even if they do need benefits. Maybe he really needs that money. That's not on you to decide. So, yeah. But shout out to that VA counselor who saw the opportunity in a veteran in need and made me walk up 3 flights of stairs to go talk to somebody else about it too.
Right. That's exactly how it was when I went back to the BSO where I had originally saw the sign about MST, David. I went back there and I decided to share just enough about what had happened to me with the veteran service officer. And he basically said, stop right there. We're going to get you connected with a social worker so we can see what kind of VA benefits you do qualify for. That was the beginning for me. And when I'll never forget when I was sitting there and I spoke to the Miss Ross is her name. I'll never even forget her name because she really opened the door wide for me and said that I had already tried everything else, and that maybe I needed to try this and try something different. And thank God I did. I mean, it just the way it unfolded, like you said, there's no right door to go in, but if you go in there and just start talking to somebody, you're going to get shoved in the right direction because there's enough veterans that work there to hopefully see that, you need to get support. So I'm grateful for that lady, actually, to tell you the truth.
Go ahead, JC, go ahead.
I was just I've got a great story about how I ended up going to the VA for therapy. And this is the best time, I think, to bring it up. And that is that I I had been working with Operation Stand Down, and I was taking veterans to the VA every day, but not going to the VA myself, except for my diabetes, and the physical things. And on my way over there one time, I was talking to one of the veterans who I had actually sat in a couple of groups with. And he said to me, he said, man, you know, you got some of the same issues as we have. Why don't you go to therapy? And I was like, why? I got 15 years of recovery. What do you think I need therapy for? He says, because you're sick, man. You got some problems. And so I said, okay, maybe. And he said, he got me a therapist. He said, I want you, go ask for this guy. Check it out. See what happens. You can't lose anything by it. And I was like, okay. So I did. I went over to the VA in Nashville. And it happens to be the VA in Nashville. If you guys have ever know about Nashville VA, it's attached to Vanderbilt University. Ooh, you know, it's like, ooh, they're real important over there. But anyway, so I go in, I get an appointment with this guy. His name is Dr. Singh, and that's Singh. And so I go into his office, and his office is the size of about 4 of my offices here. It's huge. He's got this beautiful hand-carved desk that looked like it came out of the Louvre or something, you know, Henry the 15th. He's got a degree from Vanderbilt, Doctor of Psychology, Vanderbilt University over the desk. He got his paper all over the office. And I walk in and I sit down, and it's this guy is like 24 years old. He barely has peach fuzz. He's East Indian. He has the accent, and I'm looking at him, and he says, well, good afternoon, Mr. Smith. What is it I can do for you today? And I hate to do that because I know that's kind of out of order, but I have to tell this story because at the time I was out of order. I heard that and I couldn't process anything else. In my head, I was thinking, I can't talk to this guy. And so I said, I'm sorry. I hated to bother you, but this is not going to work for me. And I got up and I walked out of his office. About the end of that day, I saw the same guy that told me to go see this guy. And he asked me how it went. And after I cursed him out a little bit, I basically told him, I said, how is that guy supposed to help me? I mean, he's 24 years old. He's East Indian. So he can't understand my culture. He's got to be rich for his family to send him over here to graduated from Vanderbilt University. He's got to have money. Man, he can't relate to me in any way. Couldn't have been in the military. So why would you send me to that guy? And dude looked at me and said, well, when you come up here for your diabetes, did that doctor have to eat the same crap you've been eating for 20 years to serve you, to fix you, to help you? He said, that really proves that you need help, that you sat up there and you judged that man before he did anything. He said, it's a science. He said, when you walked in there, did you expect to see it was going to say Dr. of J.C. Smith Psychology? And I felt about that big. And I said, okay. He said, you need to go back, man. And I said, I would. And I did. Didn't go back to that guy. I was too embarrassed to go back to that guy, but I did go back. And I did get into therapy. And I am so glad I did. I still owe that guy probably an amends, but I'm not in Nashville right now. And it says in the steps, you may direct amends wherever possible. So if I happen to see him walking down the street here in Mobile, I'll make my amends then.
And I think, JC, that's a point a lot of veterans struggle with when they go in for counseling, is having that younger vet that has no idea, never lived a life or anything like that. But just like you said, I was told the same thing. I was if that therapist tried to tell me how to break down my machine gun, what would I say to them? And then I'm like, well, yeah, they know things I don't know. So maybe that's a good thing. If they knew what I knew, they'd probably be in the same boat as me. So, yeah, but I think that's a problem that a lot of veterans go through. And that's where I think the peers are really play that role, is so that the veteran knows to expect that. Like, yeah, you're not the only one who thinks that. Every veteran in that therapist lineup has had that thought at one point, but those veterans keep coming back for a reason to that therapist. So there must be something that's working for them. So you just got to give it a shot too. But that is what a lot of us struggle with, is how can they possibly understand? And so that's why it's on us to actually tell our story and make them understand where we're coming from and how to understand us, because we can't expect them to know everything, and we can't expect them to know all of our whatever those things are that make you go down. Sorry, pulling a boy.
That's good.
This goes
It's
into
good.
TBI later when you just start talking and
You aren't alone, David. You're not alone. I don't have a TBI, but I've got enough mental health stuff that I'm right there with you, brother. So I understand that.
trigger.
And
Trigger is the word I was looking for, guys. Sorry.
And I just, man, you guys, I'm on the periphery of a lot of this. I've said before, I work with JC. I supported a lot of brothers, a lot of sisters too, with military service backgrounds. I've watched, folks just turn red and shake and be so full of anxiety. And I don't know if I've had people run out of my car when I pulled into that VA that JC's talking about. Couldn't do it. Could not even go in there. And the reason I share that is because, I met Emil through a technical assistance request, and he's the one who submitted that technical assistance request. And he did it because I think, and I won't speak for him, and I certainly hope you'll chime in when I shut up here. But what occurs to me about him even figuring that out is that he figured it out, and he's not a provider. He's not a person who's really connected to the opioid epidemic, other than being a person who's part of it, but not in a provider way. And so when Emil and I began to just disconnect and talk about where do we go from here, what's important that I'm trying to convey is that Emil didn't have a clue where he was supposed to be heading, but he wanted to get there, wherever it was. That part for me, that piece is the crux of it. Because until, as a person with a long history of addiction, until I said, I'm not doing this any longer, and there's got to be a better way for me to move forward, I just don't know what it is. It's the first time I opened myself to listening to somebody else. And actually, somebody else could actually be smarter than I am, and have a little bit more wisdom or guidance that, I don't have or haven't been exposed to. And my point being, it takes a desire to move beyond where you're at. And I think, I've heard David, you say it, JC, you've kind of sort of, swam around it. And Emil has said it. And that is that, if you don't know, and if you won't, if you're sort of isolated and you're sort of on your own, how the hell would you ever know what's available to you? And the only way you're going to get it, really to even figure it out, is to ask. So if you don't ask, nobody's going to tell you. And it doesn't matter if you go to the VA or you go to a local provider organization. if you don't know what to ask for, or even to broach the topic, then nobody's going to respond to that. And you'll suffer and deal with it in silence, misery, substance misuse, mental illness, potentially suicide, all the things that our brothers and sisters with military backgrounds endure and deal with
Yeah.
basically every day, you know?
So yeah, I'll touch on the little story about Steve and I's first interactions. Like during the sort of the peak of the pandemic, I had learned about peer support. It was very early in my recovery because I am still in early recovery, to be honest. But you know, I was learning about peer support, and I stumbled across the Opioid Response Network, and I was like, "What is this technical assistance? It sounds like it's free, and I want to learn more." And you know, not much else was going on. People were not even leaving the house at that time. I was sitting in front of the computer. So I submitted a technical assistance request around mentorship and how to become a peer. And I think I included a few other things in there as well, like veteran stuff. I was working on my discharge upgrader. I was trying to. I had no idea how I was going to do it at that time, but I was trying. And so, yeah, I got connected with Steve, and he's teaching me the ins and outs of peer support and what that looks like. And I'm telling him, yeah, I'm trying to upgrade my discharge. And he's like, you need to get that done. You need to get that done. That's a big deal. I was like, yeah, but it's like really hard. Like I got a stack of paperwork this big, and I don't even know how to navigate that paperwork, and I think I did come across a veteran service officer at that time in sort of my ins and outs with the VA trying to get treatment, who said, yeah, there's a place called the Veterans Discharge Consortium who helps veterans get, who have TBI, MST, any of these things, with their discharge upgrades. So, of course, I started that process with a lot of skepticism as well. And it's everything that any veteran does that has anything to do with the VA. I think Erica said it in the chat earlier. And my dad used to always say this, hurry up and wait. And that's been the process. But I'm glad I have, I started the process with a lot of these things. And I think it's really helped me with my resiliency to just know that, yeah, I've done everything that's in my power to try and make this happen. And, I'm staying the course because I think that if I fell off and ended up picking up using again or something like that, or if I decided that, recovery wasn't worth it and I just went homeless or whatever, that would really play into the outcome that I feel like they hope happens to me. I feel like there's a reason why these things take so long, because really they're not, in the business of trying to pay out this money to people, or not even money, pay for services, any of that stuff. I'm not even trying to get the money. It's like, I just want to try and get help. And that was what I've been able to get so far. But yeah, I think Steve has he's worked with veterans before. So it was a really integral thing for me to learn from him, how he's worked with other veterans and seen them benefit from getting their discharges upgraded, stuff like that. I don't have a lot of expectations about the outcome of that, but I have a great job now. I make good money and I'm living my best life. So Stephen is the GOAT. You're right. Yeah. But yeah, so and I'm forever grateful for Stephen as my mentor. We've worked a lot together, and we continue to do. Everywhere I'm at, I'm trying to become the best version of myself, and Steve's always been there as a really helpful person on my team. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Emil and Steve. I needed to say this too, because I know I've kind of come down hard on the VA in a lot of ways, but the VA, they are at least there. And you're right. I mean, if you know what's there, they're the greatest things since sliced bread. But, each VA is a little different. I happen to be so blessed to have been in a lot of them across the country now, and have found some fantastic people in there that really care. And I've also found some idiots. I mean, they're everywhere. You can't, they're born every day, so you can't avoid that. That's not the institution itself, that's the individuals. And so I just wanted to say that in case somebody thinks, man, they sure are hard on the VA. I couldn't be where I am today without the VA, because usually the run-of-the-mill psychologist doesn't have a background in military sexual trauma or PTSD or even TBI for that matter. They don't know. They just like, well, I read about it, but we don't deal with that a lot here in, lower Alabama. So thank God for the VA. And thank God for peers like you, Emil, and people like you, Steve. Yes, definitely the greatest of all time. And you, David. We need this kind of outreach, this kind of connection, so more people can say, well, why don't you call Emil? Isn't he right? Isn't he in the same city as you? Or, we need more peer outreach. Peers are the most important piece of this puzzle, for me anyway, because I know for a fact that without somebody who was my peer telling me that I needed to do this, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, JC's 100% right. And what's been cool is lately, prior to getting hired on at Recovery Connections, I've been working in county jail in Flagler County, and like the most, and this has actually been the most interactions I've had with veterans since I've been a peer is veterans that are incarcerated. Okay. Ironically, right? JC's nodding over there, but like, yeah, so I've come across many veterans incarcerated, most of them with, issues around substance use disorder. And the biggest need I come across immediately is housing. How do I get connected with housing? Permanent supportive housing, veterans housing, HUD bash, whatever that is, and so, like I've been working really hard to connect them with services. The particular county that I was working in is a very like low amount of services, but luckily things like that are scaling up here in Florida. We have a few new veterans recovery houses that are opening, but the need is great, and it's sad. It's kind of shameful to see veterans coming through the system over and over again, overdose, incarceration, but the peer role, which is, in Florida in particular, has been just booming. I see opportunities for peers everywhere to work in every field or in every area of lived experience, especially for veterans, especially for people that are incarcerated. So if you have lived experience, and even those of you that are providers or clinicians, and you are in recovery too, get the peer credential, man. Start to relate to people through lived experience. I think it's such a valuable role, and you don't have to just be a peer. You can be a peer and whatever else it is that you're doing. It just helps really bring in that identification through lived experience.
And if I could just add one last thing too, especially about the peers, for veterans, we're taught so long just to suck it up, drink water, take Motrin for everything under the sun. I got knocked out by an IED, take Motrin, drink water. So we're taught to suck it up for so long, and the veteran peers are really a way to kind of turn that off. Again, we can listen to another veteran when he says it's all right to tell your story. It's all right to ask for these benefits. It's all right to do this. Coming from another veteran, we take their word for that, because we were taught for so long to not do any of that. We're not taught to talk about it. We're not taught to do anything. We're taught to suck it up. So a lot of times that veteran can help us to kind of get that out of our system and help us work through the system again. And when we were talking about the VA, I think for the general public, everybody tends to think the VA is the answer for veterans, whether it's recovery, homelessness, anything that's wrong with a veteran, they think the VA is the answer. But just like recovery is just a piece of the overall puzzle, I think the VA is a piece of that puzzle too. They give you some resources, they give you some avenues to help, but it's only a piece. They still need the community supports, family supports, employment, housing. All of those come from different areas of the community, not just the VA. So really open your doors to everybody and find out who those veterans are in your office too. So then you have that ear. So find out who you're working with alongside that has served in the military as well. Thank you.
Gentlemen. Wow. So listen, we're coming into Q&A. And I've got several questions here. One of the things I wanted to raise before I forget this, though, David, you brought this up. I think Emil and JC both kind of set this up for us. But, when JC and I we were working together at Operation Stand Down, I remember coming in and asking JC and the team, because I had been doing street outreach with another organization before I, kind of onboarded with OSD. And the reason that I went to Operation Stand Down and asked for a job is because I don't know what kind of magic they was working, but they were successful in outreach and moving veterans from homelessness to return to life, to housing, to benefits, to life. And I wanted to know how the hell they were doing that, and they were doing it so successfully. And one of the things that I learned, and it was with JC and with that executive director he used to butt heads with, and with the second in command in that place too, who also had her own bit of power. And, and what I learned was that the VA has a number of resources, but they don't have them all. And the outside agencies, the nonprofits out here in the community, actually can do an awful lot for a veteran and their families that the VA can't. And so there's a partnership here that can occur between community organizations and the Veterans Administration. And all I'm saying about that is when you, as a community provider, engage in some way with a veteran, it doesn't mean you have to default to the VA for all the services there. You may have things that the VA can't do that are going to be incredibly valuable for that veteran. And I'll finish this by saying the reason this is so important, particularly for community providers, is because a lot of times when stuff is happening for that veteran, it isn't the veteran who reaches out. It's a family member, it's a wife, a brother, something like that, who is saying, man, something ain't right. And that person doesn't have access to the VA, so they reach out to the community. There's no other place that they can go. And if we're telling that person, sorry, we don't serve veterans here, that's the VA's job, we've got a problem. And we already know, just from what Emil shared, that isolation, being left alone, being not being able to find the support, makes a person hopeless. And I mean, demoralized. What's the point? I can't even get the support I need from the very people who created this challenge for me in the first place. It's super powerful. So those community organizations are critical in supporting not just the veteran, but really importantly, that veteran's family and the community around that veteran.
And I think when veterans go to those community providers, like you said, there is that reason why. Sometimes it's the distance. I drive 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on traffic, to get to my VA appointments. But whatever the reason is, if they were a Vietnam veteran, they didn't get any of the benefits or any of the support they should have got. So whatever the reason is for not going to the veteran or VA, you can use that during your counseling with the veteran. Find out what those problems he or she had with the VA and work with the veteran to get through them, because they might have just gotten overwhelmed by the stack of paperwork that Emil was talking about. And I was a Marine grunt, so we're not known to be the smartest bunch in the world. So, when you send me a big stack of paperwork, I just look for the big words. So, maybe that's the thing where that you can work with that veteran to get some of those benefits, to get them connected with the VA where they felt overwhelmed before. Whereas if you just tell them, you should be going to the VA, they'll just say, okay, like I've been told that before. I've tried that before. It doesn't work. So yeah, I think when that veteran comes to your community or as a community provider, just make yourselves more veteran friendly. You don't have to say, go to the VA. You don't have to make yourself VA. You don't have to know all the ifs, ands, or buts. Know the veteran resource close to you. Usually with all of us, at least where I live in Maryland, if you connect to one of us, we'll connect you to all of us. So know who that one resource is in your area and put up some signs and ask the question to everybody that comes in your door, not just the gentlemen like us, but anybody that walks through your door. Ask the question about, have you served in the military? I still love when I pay USAA hundreds of dollars for my crappy insurance, that they still call me Corporal Galloway. And 15 years later, they're the only ones that call me Corporal Galloway. So I appreciate that. So, that could go a long way with the veterans coming through your practices as well.
Can I add one thing to that, David? And we were talking about community resources. I'd like to add that all of the therapies and treatments that I have been through, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well, you can get them outside of the VA. I mean, I did my EMDR from a private physician. I did biofeedback from a private physician. And all of the treatments they have, CBT, all of the other acronyms, what is that, cognitive behavioral therapy and those other things. You can get those. They're not necessarily a military treatment. They are a mental health treatment. And so you're not stuck with just the VA in terms of help. That's all I wanted to add.
So I need to say one other thing that kind of hinges on what you said, David, and JC, this is also something that you were behind. So at Operation Stand Down, because of that VA power differential and how the VA impacted people when they went, we created a cubicle, put a phone and a computer in there, and we brought the VA to us. And we had the VA rep come in. They would meet with the folks that we set those appointments up with. They were in our space, so they were safe and they felt empowered, and they had representation right next to them. And they were in an organization, trust me when I tell you, these were all folks they were all veterans except me. I think I was the only one that wasn't an actual veteran. Every one of them had dealt with the VA. Several of them had retired from the VA, and one who had retired made it his lifetime mission to make sure that veterans who needed discharge upgrades and their disability upgrades got them, and they got them as fast as possible. And that technique, I've seen that replicated a couple of other times in other places, but it was beyond successful because it took away the fear, all of that sort of stigma and bias and the resentment that a lot of our brothers and sisters have, formed because of what's happened with some of the, I forgot what JC called them, because you have some good folks there, you have some not so good. So yeah. Gentlemen, are you ready to jump into some questions? I have just a few. We're at 10 minutes past the hour. We got about 20 minutes. And I think, I'm looking at the questions here, and I know you're not going to have time to answer all of them. So I think what I want to know, I think the most important thing that I'll ask, because we've been talking about this already, how do we bridge this communication further? How do we bridge the gap between those veterans and the providers? Now, I know we've talked about make it veteran friendly, don't just say go to the VA. But when we think about, particularly in the community, how veteran issues sometimes arise and come to the attention of a particular provider, as I said earlier, it isn't always the veteran. In fact, it's rarely that person. It's usually a family member of some kind, or a concerned friend, whatever it may be. How do we make this? How do we bridge this gap so that there's no wrongdoing.
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I think the easiest thing to do first is identifying the peers in your workforce already. You don't need special certification, special training. Just having that background of being a veteran and knowing a little bit of it can be a great first step to making your office more welcoming. But it's also just listening to the veteran. No two veteran stories are the same. Please never say, I know what you're going through. My uncle was in Vietnam, because I know your uncle never told you half the shit he saw in Vietnam. But listen to every veteran's story. It was hard for me to, even doing what I do, to stop saying, I know what you mean. I've been going through this too, because I came back and I had family supports where not everybody did, and financial support and things like that as well. So everybody's story is different. So just listen to it. Like the veteran, if you're working with a male veteran who suffered or experienced MST, then they're not going to feel that same camaraderie and brotherhood that I might have, because that camaraderie that I have for my brothers, and I say brothers just because I was Marine infantry during a time when it was all males, and that's who I primarily served with. I don't want to take away from female service members, but when I served with those Marines, that battle or the blood that we shed together kind of built that camaraderie, but and the spirit de corps and badass Marine sense of excellence. But if you see a veteran that's not expressing that, find out there's reasons why they don't have those same feelings, because although I wasn't a victim, I would imagine that that would just, I couldn't imagine like being betrayed by those that I share this bond with, and that should be the most honorable people I've served with. And so that would really be a struggle for me. So if you see veterans that are struggling with that, when I got out, I didn't talk about my veteran status because I didn't bring my Marines home. And that's what I was supposed to do as their squad leader. And so find out why that veteran doesn't want to talk about it. My time in the military was the best time of my life and the worst time of my life. And depending on what day, not even what day, what time of day, what part of the day you talk to me, my mind might be stuck on the worst part of the worst part or worst experiences or the best experiences. So as a clinician, it's really going to be on you to listen as I go through both and try to relate them both and bring me back. What my clinician does great now is when I talk about the worst parts of my life, they remember why they are still with me. What made my Marine buddies, what makes me remember. So instead of remembering the bad about them, I remember the good about them too, especially with this weekend coming up. So yeah, and whenever possible, hire peers. That would be because I think they are just the best transition, best outreach. We don't use all the big words. We use a lot of 4-letter words that veterans appreciate. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, I would like to address the question about working with a male who's experienced MST. I mean, honestly, it's not that much different from working with a female, I would say, but just as in my experience, building a relationship with my clinician was super critical to, my recovery process. Also, what really was sort of key in helping me figure out and navigate the discharge upgrade process, because it was the first time I had actually looked at my experience in the service in an entire timeline at one, from start to finish. And I've actually shared this with Steve before, but how that whatever it is handled. For example, my discharge upgrade, really the outcome of that and how that is handled by the person you're working with directly reflects how you handle it. You know what I mean? And the same with your providers. I could have easily backslid when I had that interaction with the provider that wasn't really the right fit for me, to say the least. Luckily, I had a good working relationship with another provider who I was able to sort of bounce back to and say, hey, this kind of really set me back. And, but in particular, talking about sex, has been the most difficult part of working with a provider for me. I wouldn't be able to work with a male provider. It just wouldn't work out. But, you know, building the relationship and then opening the door and talking about the things that are more difficult was super like key. Also, I think, you know, taking your time was really important. I didn't want to rush through anything, and just communicating honestly what's going on. Like I still have some lingering symptoms that I've communicated with my provider, and you know, just being open and honest and keeping the dialogue going. You know, I know if I start to shut down at any time and I'm not interacting, then things are probably taking a turn. So I hope that addresses that question. I'll also look at the next one real quick. What kind of supports do we each have? For me, of course, I have my 12-step group. I stay active in Narcotics Anonymous. I'm not afraid to say that out loud. I also, you know, I like I said earlier, I stay in the process of recovery. My job helps me more than almost anything else that I do. You know, working as a peer, seeing other people, helping them get recovery has been such a just a really integral part in my own recovery. You know, working with people every day has been the biggest benefit for me. I think once I got that purpose back, like we talked about earlier, it just really was a big turning point for me, and you know, helping other people, I think. So
Okay, cool, man. I would want to add, and just my own opinion, and of course it's like a billion others, but I think we need to expand on peers and peer specialties. I think there should be peer outreach specialists. I think there should be peer therapists. I think there should be peer addiction therapists and peer clinicians. I think the more we expand on that, the more people we're going to touch. And the more people we touch, the more people we help. I think they figured it out, even though it's been in use forever. I mean, AA is a peer program. NA is a peer program. But finally, the government and a lot of these private sector operations now are starting to see the importance of building that connection. That peer to clinician connection can only be done with somebody who can get their trust. Now, you don't have to trust the person so much as you have to trust the process. It's the process. Process doesn't change. Process isn't any different if you're black or white or male or female. There are some probably fine tuning for people, but other than that, you know, it's basically the same. Therapy is therapy. And in saying that, I did want to bring up one thing that we didn't talk about, and that was the cultural aspects of therapy and therapeutics. And I did want to mention that as a black man who is kind of old, I remember that mental health issues were not discussed in black families. As a matter of fact, we didn't even access mental health as a whole. Black families as a whole didn't even get involved in mental health therapies until like the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when, you know, that's just recently, you know. So for me, getting them to drop that stigma, that wall, is truly, we need more people of color in as clinicians and as peers. We need more women. We need all of these areas covered. That's what gives people that opening, that initial opening that says, well, I don't have to worry about trusting you because, I mean, we are about the same. Why would you lie to me about this? I do think we need to invest more in training of peers, you know, because being a peer is not just being a friend. As a matter of fact, it's got nothing to do with that. You know, it's got more to do with being able to break down those barriers without really saying much. It is about listening. It is a true skill, and everybody can't do it. There's no way. And how do I maintain my Sobriety. Well, the first thing was I found out what sobriety was in the first place, and it had nothing to do with my drinking and using. Sobriety, as defined in the Bible, was a virtue. It is the ability to see things as they really are. And once I started to realize that, I started to see that what made me sick, you know, what I was doing that altered my perception. And it necessarily didn't have to do with just drinking or using. It was my behavior. And it was, let me say that once I found out those issues, I was much more prepared to deal with the solutions, which for me is, I think Emil may have said it, not isolating, telling my story, you know, not lying to myself, which is the biggest one, you know, and then really just practicing better habits, practicing those things to replace the bad habits, because that's the oldest tool in the book. We could change the brain. All you have to do is just practice something different over and over and over again. I think they always told us that was a habit. Well, now the doctors call it CBT, but the same process is involved. So that's how I do it. And I think it's been working pretty much. I'm still here.
David, there you go. You're on mute.
Both of them brought up good points. One thing Emil was talking about was the trust with the clinician. When veterans come to you, we've been through the system. We know the system sucks. You don't have to lie to us about the system. Be honest with us, and please don't make promises that you can't keep, or tell the veteran this is to be expected. There are so many ifs, ands, or buts that things fall through. There's more paperwork than expected. It takes 2 years to get something overturned. So please just be honest with the veteran. Let them know what to expect. Let them know what therapy entails, what they can expect with their therapy. And we've also talked a couple of times about like AA and 12-step groups, but I think just like the VA, it's a piece of the recovery, but it's not always the right answer for everybody. For me, and one thing I didn't like that I saw my therapist once a month, and then I had to go to AA like 8 times a month in that same period. I was like, you know, I'm here for my mental health. I feel like my substance abuse is secondary. But for me though, the 12-step groups, when the person said, for me, it was surrendering to a higher power. My first thought was Marines don't surrender. We push through an ambush. And that's how I've always seen my substance use. I don't want to surrender. I want to kick its ass and not let it have power over me. I want to have power over it. So for me, it was a different thing. And so for support systems, I think find out what the veteran enjoys doing. For me, it was not isolating myself anymore. So getting involved in any group I can. There's groups that run. I don't like running, but some people do. But hunting, fishing, surfing for me, kayaking, anything on the water. It just gets me involved with other veterans and gets me talking to other veterans again, instead of isolating and staying home to myself, and usually grabbing the bottle would be the answer to that. So I think supports can come in any way, shape, or form. And I think the VA is doing a much better job of supporting non-traditional therapies like acupuncture, art therapy. I think whatever helps that veteran is therapy for that veteran. And that is what this is all about, what recovery is all about, whatever helps that veteran.
Awesome,
Yeah.
David.
I just want to bring up one more thing. David mentioned like, you know, multiple pathways is what peer support is all about. You know, what works for me may not work for you, and what works for you might not work for me. But the key thing is that you find something that does work for you and you do it to the best of your ability. Okay. You know, and I also wanted to mention that I do use medication assisted treatment to support my recovery. I don't think I would be here without integrating all the pieces that we've talked about. They've all been, I couldn't say one is more important than the other. I couldn't highlight, like, every single piece of my recovery has been so important. And once I started, you know, formulating these ideas and putting them all together, like taking the best holistic approach that I could and saying, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to support my recovery, therapy, 12-step groups, you know, team red, white, and blue, whatever that looks like for the individual. Do it to the best of your ability. And, you know, recovery is possible. I just want to say that.
Emil, that's awesome.
And on
David, go ahead.
medication assisted therapy, that is a huge struggle for veterans because if you are trying to get that therapy through the VA, that means you have to go to that VA facility if it's one of those medications you can't get in bulk or need daily. So a lot of times they are going to the community because they don't have the ability to drive 45 minutes to Baltimore to get their daily dose of medication. So a lot of time, and getting that through the VA is a whole nother headache alone. So that is one thing specifically that I know a lot of veterans go through community providers for.
Really helpful, David. JC, final thought. Got about 1 minute, and I'm going to close this guy out. What are you thinking?
You know, I wanted to bring up, we were talking about telling our story, which is a big component of recovery, and is a big component of our connection to others. I was living in Cheyenne, Wyoming for a while, and I got there through the U.S. Geological Survey, and I was in recovery, early recovery. And somebody had told me that when I got there, when I was moving up there, I needed to find 3 things. I needed to find a barber, a mechanic, and an AA meeting. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. Now I made the calls around town when I got there, and I found an AA meeting that was right across the street from the place where I was going to be working with the USGS. And so that night I drove up there. I was supposed to meet a guy that I called and told me about the meeting, and I drove up. And at the time, and I didn't really think about this, but I got there, and it was a small group, about 8 people. They were all looked like old white ranchers from the Walton's farm or some crap. It was just weird. But there I was, and they accepted me in. And so I went into the meeting, and it just so happened the meeting was about the 5th step. I didn't realize that, but it just happened that I had my 4th step written in my attaché case that was back in my motel room down the road, which I thought I would never let the light of the sun touch it because it was so devastatingly horrible. And this old rancher, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne type of guy that had, you know, looked like he was made out of leather, started talking about his 5th step experience in this group. And in my mind, I'm thinking, and I'm new in recovery at the time, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, man. I mean, he's talking about sexual abuse and the traumas that he went through and how he got to you know, get some recovery in his life. And it was upsetting to me. It was like, oh man, how could you say that? You don't even know me. And when he finished, he looked at me and he said, you know, it's still hard for me to talk about that, but every time I do, it gets a little bit easier. And for some reason, it seems to help other people to be able to do the same thing. And I was like, how does he know? And so after that visit to Cheyenne, I went back to Nashville. I went to a good friend of mine who was also in the program, and we had about the same amount of time. And we decided that we were going to share our 5th step with each other. And that way we wouldn't be able to tell on each other. Man, it is the most cathartic thing in the world to open up to somebody and let them know what you're going through. And that's what makes us successful in what we do. We have the ability to open up and feel and hear. And if they ask for it, even give them some options and suggestions. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to be here with you today. I love all of you guys. Y'all are great, man. And I will be in touch.
Guys, I don't even know what to say. I just mad respect. The courage and, you know, the content today was just mind blowing. And David, I'm so glad our paths crossed. Emil, I will always be there for you, brother. And JC, you know, much love. I'm gonna bring my wife down, hang out with you. So we're gonna be together. And I would do the same for David and Emil any second of any day. And guys, really, thank you for today. Thank you again for your service. Thank you for the service that you're going to be providing to all my brothers and sisters out there who desperately need you and who would never listen to me. And I don't feel bad at all about that. I need to close out our discussion today. I want to ask folks or thank folks. Happy joining us. There's a satisfaction survey going to pop up when we close this room. It'll take you less than 2 minutes to fill it. Please do that. Tell us your best, the good, bad, and ugly. Sign up for C4's training anytime in our newsletter at media@c4innovates.com. Thank you all for joining us for today's session. Thanks again to these amazing gentlemen, and I hope you all have a great Thursday. Thank you.